All right.
Yeah.
All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to our series on operation factors considered around a company's cybersecurity strategy. Today, we're going to be talking about the unveiling the layers coverage in cyber insurance. We had a certain topic we're going to talk about and a structure, but today I am deciding we're going to shift a little bit. Eric and I felt that we want to talk about something that's relevant, that's happening right now. So we are still going to touch base on these topics of what's coverage, how the money is affected, but I really wanted to drill down to something that's recently happened in the news. Is the breach that happened with the payroll processor for one of the largest healthcare industry that's there. They're about the third largest payment processing, and they were breached in February. And I felt it's important for a lot of medical practices. They actually have not received any payments on their insurance or are able to fulfill prescriptions for over 2 months. And that's a big impact on the company. And the tragedy is they were not breached. Third party, which was the payment processor, was breached. And since they were breached, the industry has been to a standstill when it comes to payment, anybody that's involved with them. So I felt it'd be a good time for us to now drill through policies and how that could have saved a lot of companies. Because correct me if I'm right, Eric, a lot of the policies can actually have third-party payouts if a third party gets hacked.
Oh yeah. So there's something referred to as dependent business interruption, right? If your business is interrupted by somebody that you rely on, you may be able to claim that under your policy. It's very important to look at the wording on that policy. But Wayne, to your point, that original attack with Change Healthcare happened on February 21st, right? And now we're talking about it. It's late April. Interesting that it's gone on so long as well. So that company, Change Healthcare, basically operates the billing and payment operations that underpin a large segment of the healthcare market in the U.S. When I say large, I mean the parent company, that's United Health Group, is essentially accounting for about I think an $800 or $900 million loss from this interruption at this point. And so it's fascinating because Change Healthcare was purchased by United Health Group back in October of 2022, and then it was combined in a merger with Optum, which is basically the revenue lifecycle management and clinical decision support software that also does pharmacy benefit solutions for a very large part of the hospital network in the United States. Right.
Yes.
And when this happened early on, the United Health Group came out and said that it was a nation state actor, right? So it was like a Russia, China sort of thing. Now they've clarified that a little bit, that the attacker or the threat actor was the Black Cat ransomware gang. If you look on where I've been following this on hfma.org, and you try to read through the updates on this thing, it's like 100 pages of updates because they've been posting new developments every day, and it's been really, really extensive.
Yep.
This really highlights how threat actors are using ransomware as a service. How we use like software as a service solutions,
Yes.
like Microsoft, Office 365 and Outlook in the cloud. These threat actors can go on and buy a little temporary license to a ransomware software and then deploy it wherever they want. So they don't have to kind of home grow and develop their own. They can use from the dark web, they can license somebody else's ransomware and go and deploy that to their heart's content. And that's what appears to have happened in this case.
Eric, this is the same footprint as the breach that happened a year ago with MGM. It's the same MO and the same type of tools that were used for them. But before we go too deep in that rabbit hole, I want to at least introduce ourselves to everybody. And then I want you to kind of drill down and talk about, things that they could have done proactively to help them in time like this. Because I think a lot of companies are suffering where they didn't have to, if they had proactively look at what they have in place and make sure they're good. So with no ado, I want to jump in. I'm Wayne Roy. I'm the CEO of TroyNet. As always, over 20 years of experience. I've been in a position of CEO, CIO, CTO, been in the tech industry for quite a long time. We're doing these series just to give back to the community and give back to companies, because we see a lot of people just not understanding what security is really supposed to look like. They think it's a bunch of tools, or they hear a bunch of buzzwords, or they think it's a bunch of policies, when they don't realize it's more than it's a holistic view of how you actually do business is how you stay secure. And definitely you need to do assessments, and you do need to follow some type of framework, but you also need to have some view of the people that's involved. And Eric, I'll let you go and introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. I'm what you would generally refer to as a recovering IT guy myself. I have spent the last 14 years here at Couch Brownstorff in the role of CIO. I still maintain that on a daily basis. Prior to that, I ran what you would normally refer to as a managed service provider, an IT services provider, for 8 years before that. But my focus over the last 4 years has been building out Couch Brownstorff's cyber risk group and their cyber liability practice. So the majority of my time now is spent helping our clients to better understand their position from a cybersecurity perspective and a cyber risk perspective, and help them to procure insurance if all their controls fail and they have a data breach. We want to make sure they're properly covered.
Excellent. Excellent. And that's why we got together, because we need to, one of the biggest things is breaching the gap between the tech and the operations. So we're hoping to get these things together and have conversations where we're not getting technical. We talk from a business perspective, what's your risk tolerance and what really matters to a company, without all the buzz, without all the fluff, and really digging down. Eric, you're phenomenal when it comes to the insurance, with your technical background, your view of looking at the insurance and how that really fits in strategically. Not just, hey, it's a policy, because anybody can get a policy, but the strategy behind it and how it can actually save you in cases like this example of this breach where it's a third party. My strength is more on, hey, looking at from an operational view, how can I now adopt technology in a safe manner and still function to work? Because a lot of people shove a lot of security policies down and do a lot of things to be secure, but you can't work. There has to be a happy balance, technology in a safe manner, but still be able to operate and function in a way that works. So with that being said, Eric, I'm going to pass it over to you. I really want you to spend some time and let's hone in on what's really important for a company when it comes to insurance, because that's going to be the safety net when something does happen of, hey, do I have to come out of pocket? Do I have to maintain my company out of my pocket, or do I have a buffer or some type of safety net for me to continue running my business and not lose revenue all on my own?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And so
I'm going to stop my share, so if you want to take over.
Sure. Touching base again on this Change Health thing, United Health owns them overall, but you're looking through these updates and just following it. You got Crow LLP, which is a pretty significant law firm and actually an accounting firm as well, I think. And they're sharing data showing that the delay in claims processing because of this amounted to an impact of $6.3 billion between February 21st and May 9th. Among more than 1,850 hospitals and 250,000 physicians.
So now divide that by that $1 billion number and can imagine how much these people are actually losing. Not that they lost the money, they can't retrieve it. So they can't pay bills, they can't employ employees of something that has nothing to do with them. They're doing everything right. But they can't get revenue in.
it's scary. So, this highlights a few things. One, it highlights the importance of vendor due diligence, right? And making sure that your contract language has appropriate language. And you're going to say, Eric, if I'm contracting with Microsoft, I have no leverage to have them indemnify me and provide them, me as an additional insured on their cyber liability insurance policy. I just have no leverage. And with most vendors like that, you're right? You have limited capabilities to negotiate the terms of the contract. But for vendors you can control, do make sure they have appropriate cyber liability insurance, right? Make sure if you're dependent on them in some form or fashion, that you're checking into the terms of their cyber liability insurance policy, and not only making sure that they have the appropriate coverages for business interruption and dependent business interruption, but also making sure that their retentions or their deductibles, but in most cases in cyber liability policies, their retentions are things that they can actually afford.
So
I
Eric,
stumbled.
So how would that help me? And I know that's, but I want to run through for everybody else. If I'm checking my vendor and verifying that they have a policy and they're covered, how does that help me if something happens for me? So, or for them, through them, and affects me. If they, whatever they do affects me, how does their policy now help me? Because that's their policy.
The concept of a dependent business interruption. So if my policy, right, if you're my vendor and your breach affects me and causes business interruption, I'm your dependent business interruption, right? So that on my policy, that provides coverage for what happened to you, right? And now, said another way, if your breach of your systems causes damage to my systems, I will then go sue you against your cyber liability policy and involve your vendor. The cyber liability policy, truly, from my perspective, is there to make sure that if you have an event, it doesn't totally put you out of business immediately, because that's where incident response gets involved, right? In the case of this United Health Group thing through Change Health, there's a lot more here than just a simple hack or ransomware event or phishing, sort of event. It appears to me that there may have been what looks like a complete deletion of prior backups. It doesn't look like they're able to really restore state to a place that they're safe.
That's part of their
and
challenge
contain
right
the
now.
breach at the same time. So it looks much more complicated than your typical ransomware event, where the threat actors are stealing your data, encrypting what's left, and moving on and collecting the ransom, right? There's some real havoc being caused, in a painful and malicious way with that.
With this being an eye-opener, can you talk through what are some of the things that everyone should be looking at for a policy, other than the basic? Because everybody just looks, I have a policy and I get some money. That's really what they're thinking.
Yeah.
What are the got-yous, or what are the things they need to look at and say, hey, these are things that, these are the gaps that you see often people miss in a policy and don't realize it until after something happens. It's like, and like I said, I may be getting it wrong. It's like in the home insurance for your home, but you don't have flood coverage.
Wait, exactly. So to that point, Wayne, on some cyber policies, and you may think I'm crazy about this, on some cyber policies, you can get additional endorsements for bodily injury and property damage caused due to cyber breaches. Caused as a result of cyber breaches. Yeah. Right. So the example I like to give is, those autonomous little delivery robots. They're basically coolers.
Yes.
With little wheels that push the cooler along. So they go to the restaurant, they pick up the food, right? The restaurant puts it in the cooler, and then it drives to your house, and you go open the top and pick it out, right? They're popular in the city, in Hoboken, et cetera. Imagine if a hacker, a threat actor, was able to access the guidance facility on that device and take it over, right? And run it into the middle of the street. And so part of that, it causes a car accident. So we're talking now about a threat actor hacking into a device that ultimately causes some sort of bodily injury and property damage. On your typical cyber policy, that's not covered. Right?
And most people would think so.
Well, most people would think, I have a cyber policy, it covers me for everything.
That's correct.
Right? The problem is we got to dig in and read those policies, especially as it relates to things like invoice manipulation, coverages that are added by endorsement, like funds transfer fraud or service fraud, that aren't typically on every cyber liability policy when you first get it from your broker, right? I did a review the other day. You know, the firm itself, the law firm, was especially concerned about invoice manipulation, sometimes called reverse social engineering. And they were happy with the quote option. Other than that, I mentioned that it was an important coverage, and we went back to the marketplace and negotiated for the carrier to add it. The carrier didn't want to add it because from the carrier's perspective, they know that it's a distinct possibility that that claim actually occurs, but it's important to the law firm to have that coverage. So if you're not challenging those things, you're going to walk away thinking that you might have that coverage, and you certainly don't have it. So what's going to become particularly interesting, especially as it relates to more AI, more autonomous vehicles, more smart things around our house that are connected to the internet, that may be targets of threat actors or widespread attacks, that they can cause property damage. They can cause bodily injury, right? And we just have to be super careful, not only about how we associate this technology into our lives, but then separately, how we as businesses provide coverage for that, because we're going to be liable for a whole lot more than we ever thought we would have been rather before.
Well, you brought up a great topic, AI. You and I have to do a separate segment on AI because we're doing a lot of assessments for setting up AI, especially through like Copilot. And
yeah, I love what you guys are doing with Copilot. Like, you got to talk about that more. I especially like that, you're getting into data classification as it relates to kind of bringing in your data into Copilot's purview, and how you start to bring that into the organization and think about all the aspects of not only data security, but user adoption, usability, how Copilot is enabling people to be more productive as opposed to replacing jobs. Like, there's a lot to talk through there.
Definitely, you're spot on with it. And the classification is very critical, important for everything. Nobody should be looking at putting any AI in until they do the groundwork to make sure it's right and make sure it's set up. But we need to talk on it. We're going to do a different segment on, I'm really looking at what is now insurance is going to look like with now this prevailing AI and the exposures that's going to happen around that.
We need to talk about that definitely in another session, because it's a whole big another topic. I want to take a second here, talk about the areas of data breach cost buckets, specifically as it relates to a firm that had a relatively rudimentary ransomware attack, where they on a particular Friday morning, they realized that they had a number of encrypted files, and they also had limited access to their corporate email and issues logging into computers. Turns out they disconnected everything from the network, figured out that they certainly had a data breach, and they reached out to their insurance broker. They reached out to the insurance carrier. The carrier assigned incident response, and then assigned a law firm. Right off the bat, that was $180,000 for incident response. There was $25,000 for the law firm on a retainer. There was a ransom of a certain amount, $225,000. Obviously, the first ask didn't start there, but it got negotiated down. And then, you have things that you don't often think about that occur weeks and weeks after the initial breach. One of those is lost data indexing. You might ask yourself, Wayne, what is that? If you have 1 million records of of like files on your share drive, 1 million files. And they're of all different shapes and sizes. You might have some Excel files, some PowerPoint files, some PDFs, scanned documents, etc. Well, if all that data has been stolen and you have to go through and catalog where the personally identifiable information is, it takes time to go through those files one by one. So you could either do that yourself and burn all that internal time, or you can pay somebody on the outside to go through those files and catalog it for you. And it's a cost that you don't often think about in a data breach that just kind of happens to poke up and surprise you later. The other components that we often think about are regulatory defense and penalties and network and information security liability. So this is the area where you're providing your customers notice that their information's been stolen, and providing them perhaps identity theft monitoring or whatever you need to do to remain compliant with the various states and regulatory organization. And then, of course, there's the element of business interruption, right? Depending on how long you're down, the business interruption component, once calculated, could be a large component. I like to use the idea that if a business makes about $35 million in revenue a year, each day is about $100,000. So 7 days down is 700,000.
And Eric, just from statistics, they say you lose to recover one device is about $1,900. Each employee is about $130 per day.
Yep.
And the average ransomware is 21 days to recover.
Yeah.
So you do that 21 times 130, you cross your cost allocation around that time frame. And this is the average. There's some that's higher, there's some that's short, but on average, it's around. That's a long period of time.
Yeah.
If you're running a business, manage your business down for 21 days, calculate all the costs that are associated with that. You'll understand why it's important and paramount that you understand what do you have? What's your backup? What's going to cover me if these things happen? And the minute of payment that you have to have that policy and have the right coverage is nothing compared to the cost that you may have if something goes down. That you will have, not may, you will. Because either your policy is going to pay it or you're going to pay it out of pocket. And it hurts.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's an understatement. Right?
Yes.
And then so to your point, what's included, what's not included, it's very important to look at the various exclusions that are on those policies, especially as it relates to terrorism, the war exclusion. There's some widespread event exclusions, or what they often will call widespread event endorsement that carriers have been putting on policies. There's an endorsement that is often referred to as like neglected software, which basically says if you don't patch in a certain period of time, your coverage starts to erode or decline if you don't patch in that period of time. We could go on and back and forth about the importance of patching, but we won't do that in this particular discussion. I'm
curious about something, especially things like in the manufacturing and devices area. A lot of them have old and outdated operating systems, not because they choose to, it's because that's what they have, and they would have to revamp what they have. How does that now pan out? I assume that's going to be, would you guys consider it as something that's excluded and the company would have to find ways to mitigate it? I know what we've done is, hey, that thing's isolated, it's not on the network, does not communicate with anything else because that's a threat. So you isolate that device. But is there any leeway in a policy that can address things like that?
Yeah, there sure is. So if you have software that's end of life, that is out of manufacturer support or is really, really old from the operating system level, you got to make sure that you're being forthcoming on the application with that, and that your broker understands what your technology stack looks like. The trouble there is often brokers will place insurance policies and not really dig deeply into that question of whether you have outdated software, And there'll be an exclusion on your policy for that. Often, if you answer the question that yes, you have outdated software, they'll ask you what you've done to mitigate that. So have you fenced it off and kind of isolated it from other devices on the network? And do you kind of have it in its own little sandbox? And that's particularly important from a risk management perspective, but also, kind of from an internal IT operations perspective, as well as business risk. It's important, if you have those really old and outdated systems, that you have some sort of analog backup to be able to still run the production line manually if that system breaks down, right? Because now you're kind of betting your entire capability of the business on the back of this Windows 95 server that you have to plug a 3.5-inch floppy into.
And we've seen that in certain industries, you'll see that because, and I think it's not.
And I know, Wayne, Windows 95 isn't a server operating system.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't going to let you, but I get the gist of what you're saying. But heavily, like in manufacturing, they'd be running something that's just because it's not even being supported anymore. But because they're so embedded in it, it's cost prohibitive at the moment to make a quick shift. They have to gradually cut it over.
Wait, we have that in spades in New Jersey. We have a lot of pharma and biotech.
Yep, that's
in
exactly
New Jersey, and a lot of lab machines that are, when they initially were manufactured, they ran their lab diagnostic software on top of like Windows XP or even worse, like Windows 2000, and they still work fine, right, in doing what they should be doing for the analysis of whatever they're putting into the laboratory machine. But that computer, if it's connected to the network, has a slew of known vulnerabilities that the manufacturer, Microsoft, is not patching for, right?
Yep.
So you may have a $6 million lab analysis machine that runs on Windows XP.
So it's bottom line is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what we've done, is we've put together a strategy around that device, and we were able to explain to the provider how we're doing due diligence to make sure that's not a point of contention and risk to the company. Things like creating it under the VPN, not a VPN, a VLAN, and segmenting that device and saying, hey, I've done these things to minimize the risk of anything even getting to that. That's why we can still leave it in production. But you also have to provide that to your carrier. It's not a secret. It's okay to tell a carrier, hey, we have this thing that's a issue, but hey, it's not an issue because we've done these things to mitigate the risk to that device. I want to let people know that, because a lot of people are afraid to admit that, hey, because running a business, sometimes you have those things that just cannot be changed right now.
Yeah.
But hey, they want to see that you have a plan in place, you have a strategy around it, and you can prove that you've done due diligence to safeguard that thing. And then they're good with that.
Yeah, they're typically going to rely on the narrative, right, that you're providing for what that system is, right? And they're not really going to let you get away with saying like, yeah, I have Exchange 2003, right? And we use that in production on a daily basis. And oh, by the way, Outlook Web Access is open to the internet without MFA, right? That's not the kind of narrative. That's a positive underwriting aspect.
Those things you can mitigate. There's no reason for you to be there with it.
Right. What they're gonna, look for more is, we have a lab analysis machine that is segmented from the network. It operates on its own VLAN. It doesn't have access to the internet. It just has access so we can pull files off of it if we need to. And here's the set of additional preventative or mitigating measures we've taken to make sure that nothing can attack that, or we're at least minimizing the attack surface that's there, right?
Yep, spot on.
Yeah. So to the question of, maybe we're shifting gears a little too quickly here, but we talked about what's covered in the cyber insurance policy. We talked about what sort of compensatory damages you might receive, or insurance coverage you might receive from the insurance carrier, what's included, what's typically not included. But one of the important things is what to do if there's an incident, right? And when you get that policy from your insurance broker, first couple of pages will have their incident response line or their data breach coach line. You'll call into, that's where you initiate the claim and get assigned incident response. There might also be claim reporting instructions in that policy, and that's why you got to read that first couple pages really carefully, because they may require that you send an email to a specific place, detailing a little bit about the claim and what's currently happening. But what I can tell you from personal experience with a couple clients that have been through it before and used their insurance policies, really important to have a contact sheet, including names, personal email addresses, and phone numbers in paper of the people that you're going to be contacting with. So you're going to need to be able to get in contact with incident response and know their phone number and their email address, and need to be able to get in contact with the law firm you're assigned for data breach, for the data breach law, and know their phone number and their email, as well as any of the important in-house people that you may need to contact and coordinate with, because there's nothing worse than having your email system down, completely relying on your cell phone, and then not being able to access your contacts on your cell phone because your email server's down. Right?
It's full-blown instant response plan. And if anybody's just watching and they want an instant response plan, a template, email us and we'll share a template instant response plan that you can kind of fill out for your company. It's not the answer, it's a starting point. You have to expand on what's there, but it gives you the foundation of who to contact and the escalations.
Yeah.
And that's a good starting point. But with that, Eric, I think we're at the end. Okay, I'd like to just throw up a little bit of contact information for everybody. So if they ever want to contact us and reach out to us, we're going to be doing a few more series. Eric, we definitely got to get the AI in because I think people will really be interested in. But if you guys want to, definitely security assurance assessment, we have Eric here. He can take a look at your policies. It doesn't cost anything and there's no obligation. We just want to help out and make sure that you have the right things in place. If we see anything out of place, we'll give you free advice of, hey, maybe go back to who you're dealing with and maybe missing this and this, because if this happens, you're exposing yourself to something that may cost you a lot out of pocket. We're here to help. We're here to improve the community. We help companies become successful. So with that being said, any closing word on this, Eric?
Oh, this is great, Wayne. Thanks for letting me join you. I appreciate it.
I definitely appreciate your time. So reach out to us at engage@detroittranet.com or stop at our website and go to our cyber assurance assessment, fill out the contact, reach out to us. Eric and I will follow back up with you and we can take a look at your cyber policy and tell you what we may see and what may be out of place. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks. Bye-bye.